Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by Husky Harry, huggable homos, and friends who love film and like to dish up a little bit of movie review goodness as well as some film news. This week, of course, will be no different. We're going to be reviewing Spider-Man: Homecoming, the newest reboot? Question mark. I guess that's the correct term of the Spider-Man franchise. I think it's been rebooted about 12 times already. We're gonna talk about this latest reboot and kind of how we feel. We're also going to be dishing up some movie news for you guys, so we've got some fun stuff to talk about. Before we get to that, though, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my fantastic co-host. Jim Pugliafco is with us on the show. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, babe, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey there, true believers. So glad to be with you to talk about this movie tonight.
All right. We are also joined by a long-time friend of the show, but even longer time friend of the three of us personally, Felipe Garcia. Felipe, oh my God, it's been forever. How are you doing?
Like forever. What's up, guys? I'm happy to be here back on the show to talk about Iron Man 4. I can't wait.
Well, that's pretty much true. But yeah. Well, Felipe, great to have you back with us. I know you've been like salivating for this movie. You're going to have to salivate for a little while longer, I'm afraid, because we're going to talk movie news before we review the movie.
I think I can do it. All right.
We'll do our best. All right. Well, that said, what's with the sunglasses, guys? That's interesting.
That was my Iron Man thing, and then Jim joined me.
Jim joined you. So you've got Iron Man sunglasses. Jim, you've got like sexy cop sunglasses going on.
I guess sexy gay cop sunglasses, maybe.
Will's got a Spider-Man face thing. The only thing I can do to compete with that is my Spider-Man 3D specs.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. Thwip. But they're 3D glasses, so my screen looks all crazy with them on. So we're going to save those for later. But how do we feel about diving right into some movie news, guys? Get this party rocking and rolling.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do it.
I'm all about it.
All right. Well, we are going to make that segue here in just a second. Want to give a quick shout out. We've got a bunch of people who are jumping on right now, listening live here for Spider-Man. We are going to be talking about Spider-Man here in just a little bit. So bear with us as we dish up some movie news, and then we'll get to that discussion. But don't forget, give us a shout out in the live chat. We would love to hear from you guys. Let us know your thoughts on the film, and we may give you a shout out on air as long as, you know, it's sort of appropriate for our YouTube audience, and would be happy to kind of hear from you guys. So jump on in. But that said, here we go. I've rambled enough. Some movie news. All right, so Jim, kick us off this week. What's got your interest?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before we talk about Spider-Teen, I want to talk about a movie called Ready Player One. We've talked about this movie coming up. It's on the list for director Steven Spielberg. This is his new a new project that's coming up that he's actually going to direct. Brad and I got a chance to go through the audiobook. Well, Brad read the book, and then we both listened to the audiobook. And it's an interesting story. It's very for you guys who don't know what it is, it's basically kind of a video game played out against a video game nerd fantasy played out against a post-apocalyptic society. And it's the whole thing is kind of this big quest or big contest, and it's pretty interesting. It's going to be crazy to see how they do this on the screen. But the news here is that John Williams, the composer who's composed every single one of Steven Spielberg's feature films, has now dropped out of composing Ready Player One and is going to be replaced by Alan Silvestri, who did the music for the Back to the Future films. So Yeah, I mean, so this is a departure for Steven Spielberg. I'm not sure it makes me worried or anything. Silvestri knows how to score movies. But the John Williams, Spielberg thing has been really special. And maybe for those people who are kind of looking for that team to hit the screen again, this might be a little bit of sad news. And the reason that John Williams dropped out is because I guess he's got other projects going and there were conflicts. And he just couldn't get it done. So, yeah, Ready Player One is going to be scored by Alan Silvestri instead of John Williams. What do you guys think? Do you care? Is that a bummer? Still interested?
So I guess I'm interested. I know you need sort of like incidental music in the score, but having read the book, I almost feel like this movie is crying out for like a Guardians of the Galaxy-esque soundtrack. The book references so many great songs that I could see playing over a lot of these different scenes. Felipe or Will, have you guys read the book at all?
Yeah,
Yes.
for me, I love the Ernest Cline books. I know there's this one. He's also sold the film rights to Armada, which is a second book, which means Universal is going to be putting out that movie eventually too. And I think you're absolutely right. Like I'm not necessarily like mourning the loss of Williams for Silvestri in this particular case, because I think either one will be fine in terms of developing a great score. Of course, Williams is fantastic when it comes to these types of things, but I'm right there with you. Like, this story is just absolutely dripping with pop culture awareness. Like, this is nostalgia, the book. And so not utilizing very heavily those nostalgic tunes, I think, is probably a miss. I think this really needs you mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, also think like, Baby Driver or something like that. Just a soundtrack that's just going to like take you back and make you think about like, oh man, it was so cool when I first listened to this. That's what this story is. That's what the music should probably be. But then I guess that's also fairly expensive to get all the rights to all of that. So that's another concern.
Brad, I think you're dead on. It's been a while since I've read the book, but still, I honestly think that music has to be there. You guys, I'll keep it short and sweet. I really think it would be a huge missed opportunity if it's not there with the film. We've already seen that it can work in the right dose, because we've seen films where it can. So in the right dose, right songs chosen for the right moments, I think it'll fit perfectly if they go that route. Not having Williams there is a little bit of a drag, but I can see getting over that with Silvestri.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. This movie is coming out next year. Is that right? 2018, Jim?
Oh boy, I wish I had done my research. The movie comes out. It comes out in January of next year. So
January. Okay.
That's coming right around the corner, guys. I mean, it's not that far away.
It's coming up quick. Yeah.
Actually, it's going to have a limited release in December, but it'll hit wide release in January. But yeah, Silvestri, with his movie experience, movie scoring experience, the Back to the Future films, some of that music's going to pop up in this movie, right? I mean, Back to the Future, I think, is part of that story, if I remember right. So yeah, I mean, Silvestri could be a big fit here. We'll see what else they can fit in, what other musical surprises we can get in here. Again, Brad, I agree. This movie is a great opportunity to really knock it out of the park with soundtrack. Like we saw Guardians of the Galaxy do. Heck, we saw Baby Driver do it too. So if you get if you get the proper rights to the right songs in there, this could be really elevate the story. We'll see.
They really are creating a new genre here. And I saw somebody use the term the other day. Maybe you guys have heard it. I hadn't. Action musical.
Yeah.
And like I said, done the right way, that's just going to continue that path of these types of movies coming out, which also it takes care of pleasing a lot of different people too, not just one certain set. That music could attract somebody else depending on the nostalgia or what the meaning is behind it.
Right.
It's true. And, even for like Guardians, for instance, it introduces people to a lot of music they may not have heard before. And I'm thinking about, yes, this book, and I know we've got other movie news to talk about, but this book, nostalgia, the book, Will, you said, it's so true. But I think a lot of younger folks are probably going to go see this movie. It's right up their alley. And they're going to discover bands like Simple Minds and Duran Duran, and you know what I mean, as a result of this film. So I think that's fantastic. Even though I probably will own most of the music used, I already own what was mentioned in the book. I'll probably buy the soundtrack anyway, just so it's like collected in one place.
And that nostalgia point is part of why the story is so exciting for me, because one of the major aspects of that particular story is there's a huge Dungeons and Dragons element, and surprise, I'm a D&D nerd. And so they very heavily reference one of the most iconic classic D&D modules in this. And I'm hoping that this now leads more people to kind of explore some of those old storylines that, like someone who's been gaming for a year or so may not have otherwise had exposure to. Austin King makes a really good point here in chat. Ernest Cline is an Austin local. Armada, he says, I couldn't even finish Armada. And that's a pretty fair argument. I couldn't either. But I'm really hoping, in that initial, like, this is the guy that got his start doing like Austin, like poetry slams for years, and kind of working with like local Austin film rags. Like, if this film doesn't have a strong limited run here in town, I feel like we might all riot. Like, this is our hometown boy gun good. Like, so we definitely want to get this one. New York and LA will get it earlier, unfortunately, because of Spielberg, but damn it, we want it early too. This is our guy.
All right. Well, good stuff. Will, what have you got this week?
So this one I'm hesitantly excited about. We just got news about a brand new Quentin Tarantino project. None of the ink is dried yet at this point. In fact, I don't think any of the ink has even splashed onto the paper yet. But right now, he's in talks to work on a new movie that is about the Manson family murders, which is an interesting topic for Tarantino, because up until now, he's done primarily like completely divorced from, aside from like some kind of revisionist stuff in Inglourious Bastards, all of his stuff has been sort of kind of divorced from historical events. This is his most true to a story that he would have done to date. Attached to it so far are Brad Pitt, who was in Inglourious Bastards, and Jennifer Lawrence. So this is one that I'm hesitantly excited about. Hesitantly because I've been disappointed by some of his more recent films, and I know that not everyone shares that sensation. But I was not a big fan of Hateful Eight, nor was I a big fan of Django. But I long for the day when Tarantino will kind of make that same film that recaptures me the way that he has in the past. So every time he comes out with a new one, I'm all in, and until he inevitably disappoints me again. This film is still a ways off. We're talking about shooting, like the film shoot would probably start summer of next year. So we'd be probably looking at a release date somewhere thereafter, I'm guessing 2019 at this point. So it's still very much early talks, but Tarantino is a big name. Brad Pitt, Jennifer Lawrence are big names. This is kind of big news. I'm hesitantly excited. How about you guys?
That's J-Law. Sign me up. I'm there.
And Brad Pitt of World War Z, sign me up.
Katniss versus Brad Pitt.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an interesting combination. I mean, I think everybody's kind of dying to see if Tarantino has really still got that kind of that filmmaker's touch, that auteur's touch that we loved from, like the Pulp Fictions and Kill Bills and all that stuff. It's going to be interesting depending how close to the story he goes. This could be maybe just some kind of riff on the Manson murders. Who knows? It could be the slate could be pretty wide there, but I'm mildly interested to see what he does here. So yeah, bring it on. Hey, did I hear something that he's only going to do like 2 more movies?
Really?
I feel like one of the things, and I don't remember if it's 1 or 2 or something like that, but I remember at some point he started making the round saying like, movies aren't where it's at anymore. Now it's all about television. So I'm going to back away from this, and I'm not making any more, or I'm only going to make 1 more. I'm only going to make 2 more. So I wouldn't be surprised if that will dries up for him eventually, like that if he backs out of the game. At the same time, I think when you're a guy like Tarantino who rests his hat so heavily on being like the auteur filmmaker, to not make films sort of diminishes kind of your, not your reputation, but kind of your identity and your brand. So I have a feeling this is going to be one of the, me personally, my guess is we're going to hear a lot of like, I promise you I'm going to retire after the next one stories for a few more films.
Yeah.
We will see. All right. Interesting.
Definitely.
All right. Let's move on down to Felipe. Felipe, what have you got this week?
What I found interesting was for news is actually borders kind of on television, but revolves in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so to speak. That is Freeform and Disney's Marvel's New Warriors. They've landed a Squirrel Girl for their role in this TV show. And she is none other than Mila Weintraub, who is the AT&T girl of all people.
Nice.
So it's a story about 6 people coming together, 6 young kids coming together to figure out their abilities and how they fit in the world, which seems to be the theme of a lot of TV shows nowadays. And so definitely not new territory, but it's interesting to see that we're using this particular character along with this group of other kids that are going to be on this show. And of all people to get it, the AT&T girl, who is and has been a former Russian model and a comedian. So I think this kind of suits her, in my own personal opinion. What do you guys think?
Somebody needs to explain to me who Squirrel Girl is.
Squirrel Girl.
Go for it.
Give me your like 1 minute description.
Go, Will.
Okay, so Squirrel Girl is a character who started out as a gag. She showed up in this weird little spin-off title called the Great Lake Avengers, which became the Great Lakes X-Men, and they were the B-lister superheroes. Like, they were made to be punchlines and comedies. And her gag was she had squirrel powers, kind of like Spider-Man. She could talk to squirrels and strength of a squirrel, agility of a squirrel, all that stuff. But in addition, like, the gag that the artist started doing with her is you would turn a panel, and then you would see just like a super big villain like Thanos or Galactus just unconscious, and she'd be like, well, I just beat that guy. And so she's got these like great victories that all happened off panel. She became sort of a cult hero from there. And she's in recent years been brought into the forefront with her own kind of lead title. She's had a trajectory not unlike Deadpool, which is sort of like comedic character who kind of showed up from time to time to A-lister. One of my favorite characters, one of the few comics that I still purchase, is her solo title. So I'm all about her in this show. Like, give me as much eating nuts and kicking butts action as Squirrel Girl can give us.
Well, thanks for that tutorial. That was
couldn't
awesome.
have said it any better myself, Will. Actually, there was a big push to have her placed in the MCU for the Infinity Wars, and I think some of that outcry kind of rubbed off, and they wanted to do something with her. So I think this is a good choice. TV is probably perfect.
And Brad, there's another kind of a correlating piece of news that I think you would probably be pretty excited too. They cast this character also in that show called Microbe. He's a guy that can control like bacteria and microbes, whatever. But most importantly, the actor is the guy that's the voice actor for Lars in Steven Universe.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I know you're a big Steven Universe fan, so that was like, I was like, oh yeah, that guy, huh? We get to actually see him. He's also in Two Broke Girls, so we get to see him there as well. But I'm all about seeing like the Steven Universe characters like get more screen time.
Will, I have to ask, because you mentioned it. Are you current on Steven Universe?
I am current on Steven Universe.
Oh my God, Lars!
Oh my God, Lars! And oh my God.
Hodor.
We'll have to talk offline. We've got so much. Like okay, guys, tune in afterwards as Brad and I have the 2-hour Steven Universe Geek Out podcast.
What?
It's just 2 hours of us going, oh my God, right?
We need to do that. We totally need like a Steven Universe episode.
The Movie Bears universe.
Hmm.
Movie Bear Gyms.
Can I be Lion?
You can totally be Lion.
Oh, no. Lion 5, the podcast. Anyway, sorry for all of the inside references. Nice, Will. Oh, that's great. All right. Hey, for me this week, just a quick bit of movie news from me. I know we've got a whole movie to discuss, so I'll keep it short. The new poster for the new season of Stranger Things came out. And of course, the internet is totally abuzz. Let me go ahead and pop that up on the screen for those of you who are maybe watching us on the old YouTube. Looks like we've got some kind of stormy demon in the sky. For those who are not watching, if you haven't seen the poster yet, just Google Stranger Things season 2. It's like the first image that comes up.
Yeah, it's like E.T. meets something wicked this way comes or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the show has got such a great like 80s horror movie / ET vibe already. I'm excited to see where they go with it. So October sounds far away, but like it was just January, and July sounded far away. So Stranger Things season 2 will be here before we know it. Are you guys excited for the new season?
Jim is.
Jim shrugs.
I'm a shrug. Yeah, I'll watch, of course. I don't know. I'm not as wrapped up in the hype on this show as a lot of people are. I appreciate it. I think I love the references, and it's a callback kind of fest. But it's got a good story also, and it's got some good characters. So that's what I watch it for. But yeah, I'll be watching.
And Felipe, I know we talked a little bit before the episode. Are you all in on Stranger Things?
Oh, 110%. Please give me the kids, give me the music, give me Steve. Is he still around? I want to see Steve in that hair, that Duran foof this way.
He's the bully guy.
Give me Winona Ryder. Well, yeah. And I want to see where this goes. Sheriff, I want to know what's happening with the Upside Down.
Waffles, man. Waffles.
Lots of waffles.
Also, can we please have more of the sheriff and his tidy whities, please? That
would... So there's a 3-episode arc in the middle that is really just him turning around in his tidy whities just for you, Brad. Like that's
yes. Wearing a sheriff hat, please.
Well, episode 3, he does wear the sheriff hat. Episode 4, he coyly kind of takes it off. And episode 5, he's just completely
flings it at the camera,
bareheaded, just like, like not a stitch of clothing from the neck up. Like, no, it's
as long as it's handled, delicately as serious arc, I'm on board.
But speaking to this poster, like, I mean, I'm a big fan of this series as well. This is the type of poster that gets people excited about things. Like it shows the characters that we love. It shows obviously something foreboding, like something coming up, like like, oh my gosh, like what are these kids gonna face? I can't wait till October to find out. But on top of all of that, like, I can't think of a more recent use of color that was just this vivid and this bold. Like, this is a well-made poster, and like, outside of everything else, just like kudos to the art on this. Like, this is good shit.
It totally is. Jim and I recently saw, what was that movie, Jim? Forgetting Sarah Marshall? Is that what it was called?
I think so.
So like the main character, unless I'm mixing movies, like designs movie posters, and it's like, here's some clouds and some faces in silhouette in the sky.
That's right. Yeah.
Like movie poster. Like this poster is totally anti that. So you're right, Will, definitely.
But it does get that orange blue thing going. Got to have the orange blue. Orange blue. Yep. Orange blue. Yep.
Indeed. Very true. And Austin in the chat, just calling back to a few minutes ago, says he needs that Steven Universe podcast from us, Will. So clearly we need to make that happen.
We'll have to make that, like, I mean, that would be kind of a fun, like on a week where, like, we'll have to find out when this magical week happens, but where both you and I just have like a free night where we're not committed to activities or other movies, and just sort of do like a bonus special content thing. Just like, guys, let's just rap about SU for a bit. You know, like that would be a fun thing to do when we have that gap in our schedule.
Totally.
I would be down for that.
Maybe we could make Jim watch a couple of the first couple episodes or something and get an outsider perspective.
I've seen one or two. Kit Kats or whatever they are. Kitty cat. Cookie cats.
He left his family behind.
Huh?
Sorry.
Okay, we need this podcast.
Anyway, all right. Hey, we've got a whole movie to discuss, believe it or not. So how do we feel, guys, about making that spider segue?
Whip the whip.
Wait a minute. My spidey sensors are telling me that we're going to review a movie.
Well, that's a pretty shitty spider sense if it told you that after I indicated we were going to review the movie.
That's true. Although, never mind. I'm not going to spoil anything. I was going to say something.
All right. Well, let's do this before we get into the film discussion, because we do have several folks who are hanging out with us live, or we may have folks who are listening on digital tape delay. We're going to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming spoiler-free for probably 10 minutes or so. It's going to be a brief spoiler-free section. Who are we kidding? If you're listening to the show right now, you probably have already seen the movie anyway. But if for some reason you haven't, you're kind of on the fence after the last 11 Spider-Man reboots, feel free to hang out with us for a few minutes after the trailer. Jim's lovingly going to drop in for you and hear our initial thoughts on the film. Maybe it'll help sway you one way or another. In any event, all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Spider-Man Homecoming. Thwip, 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 thwip. All right, so we are ready to go with this Spider-Man discussion. Will, as the resident super comic nerd, I love comics too, but your comic knowledge nerdiness way surpasses mine, and that's an amazing thing. Why don't you go ahead and kick this movie off for us? Give us your initial thoughts on the film and whether you think people should check it out in theaters, rent it, skip it. You know the drill.
Absolutely. So what is this movie about? Spider-Man Homecoming. Let's go with the synopsis first, then we'll talk about some of the history. Peter Parker, with the help of his mentor Tony Stark, tries to balance his life as an ordinary high school student in New York City while fighting crime as his superhero alter ego Spider-Man when a new threat emerges. And that's basically what you get with this movie. This movie comes from kind of an interesting place because it is the product of a huge compromise between two companies, and that in and of itself makes this a spectacular feat. For the longest time, Sony had full control over Spider-Man. They made the 3 movies with Sam Raimi / Tobey Maguire. They made the 2 Andrew Garfield films. And after the last one did not do as well, they came back to Marvel and said, let's make a deal. And so now Sony still has the rights to the character, but he is allowed to appear in Marvel films and as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In other words, both companies can profit from what is arguably probably the Superman of the Marvel universe, the most iconic superhero in this particular side of comicdom. What I enjoyed so much about this movie is that it allowed us to skip all of the origin story stuff. Each of the Tobey Maguire and the Andrew Garfield stories were anchored so much by the fact that they had to tell us how he got his powers and taught him how to do that. In this case, he's already Spider-Man, and his story is more about how does he deal with the fact that he is now sort of an apprentice to the Avengers and Tony Stark, but while also being kind of a street-level hero. I think the important thing to lampshade here is that this is not the best Spider-Man movie to come out. This is in the shadow of Spider-Man 2 with Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire, Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, which I think you can have an argument as that being one of, if not the best superhero movie of all time. That's a very clear and easy argument for someone to engage in. This movie is not one of the best superhero movies of all time, but it is a damn good one and is a damn fun one. That said, I think Tom Holland is a perfect cast as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. He plays fun and quick-witted while also nervous and a little bit socially awkward without it being too clunky. I think that's really good. We have a strong supporting role, performance here by Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. He Tony Starks it up. I think it's perfectly fine. They use him as much as the story needs. This film also has one of the best villains that we've seen in a superhero movie lately. Marvel movies have a, as much as I enjoy them, they have a villain problem. Only a few of them have really solid villains. And I think that what we get here with Michael Keaton as the Vulture is one of my favorite villains to date. This is a story that is not things exploding in space or the world's going to end or a giant laser in the sky, which means that the entire world will end if this one hero doesn't do this one thing. This is a much smaller scale story, and I think that works totally perfectly for where this character is at in his arc, where this villain is at in relationship to that hero's arc, and where this film is as a kicking off point for this new Spider-Man story. So for me, not a perfect movie, but a really fun one and a really enjoyable one that I strongly recommend.
All right. Strong recommend from Will. Felipe, I mentioned earlier, I am dying to hear your thoughts about this movie. So where do you come down?
I come down on a little bit higher side than Will, but right alongside Will.
Ooh.
I do not think that this is the most perfect comic book movie, but I do think it's the best alongside, very true, the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi, Doc Ock story. You know, that second one, I think they can both sit atop because those are two different Peter Parkers, in my opinion. But this movie, you know, I think, like I said, it's hard to follow Will. Will's nailed all the best points, I think, honestly. The villain made it for me. The music, the soundtrack that went along with this, mixed in with, you know, a little bit of Tony Stark here, and some other items that, you know, that we can talk about in spoilers, really got me over the top of maybe this was going to be too kiddie of a film, or maybe we would see, you know, certain things too much. But I think they nailed everything. And I can tell you, you know, being with one of my kids on that day, he was, you know, he's just sophomore, you know, going into his junior year at college. He was stoked about this movie and was ready to see it again. This thing hits all the marks, and I over the moon, ready to see it again. I love it. I really did. Also, like you said, Tom Holland, perfect. That kid I believe had a small parkour background to begin with. So a lot of these things that he's doing, the stunts, whether they may be minor, whether they used him or somebody else, I'm sure he had a big input in that too as well. So big thumbs up for me. Definitely a recommend.
All right, two big recommends. There are two of us yet to weigh in. I will go next and say this is a big recommend for me too. I'll just put it out there. I don't want to belabor the points that you guys have already made, so I'm just going to call out a couple of other things here real quick. Marissa Tomei, fucking love her. She's amazing. Love her as Aunt May. And it's kind of interesting because we're used to Aunt May in the previous Spider-Man movies as sort of this like elderly woman who probably should be named Martha instead of May, you know, I don't know.
Marlene.
But you know, in this interpretation of the Spider-Man mythos and universe, she, I'm guessing, is like a late 40s, early 50s something, struggling to make ends meet. Different take on Aunt May, but really welcome here. Love seeing it. I also really like the diversity of the cast of this movie, especially when Marvel's had a bit of an issue lately with some of the whitewashing. I'm looking at you, Doctor Strange, Tilda Swinton. Not your fault, Tilda Swinton, but I'm just saying. It was nice to see a really nice blend here in the cast. It's not all just like white guys being super heroic. So that was great. One of the things I will say, even though it's a big recommend for me, guys, this movie was way too heavy with the suit shenanigans. Like, I like the suit. The suit looks cool, but like when we get into like all the shit that the suit can do and special things, and it kind of took me away a little bit from like the inventiveness of Peter Parker himself. I felt like, Felipe, you made a joke earlier about this being like Iron Man 4 a little bit. And I kind of got some of that, not so much because we see Tony Stark too much, but because like Tony made the suit and look at all the cool things Tony built into the suit. And it's like, well, okay, but like, what about Peter Parker? Like, what about the cool things Peter Parker can do? So if I had one complaint about the movie, that's probably it. Movie has a great sense of fun. Michael Keaton, I was a little worried, guys, to be honest, because I was like, really? Birdman is going to be the Vulture? Like, really? But he was excellent in this. I really, really loved him in this role. Loved seeing Donald Glover pop up. Had no idea he was going to be in the movie.
Yes.
It was a nice surprise. I was like cheered in my seat. I fucking love that dude. And of course, Robert Downey Jr., a little bit of him goes a long way. I think when we get to our spoiler section, maybe we can have that discussion. Was he overused? Was he used just enough? And then, of course, there's other things to unpack as well. But big recommend from me. Jim, where do you come down?
I'm going to come down slightly under you guys. I still like this movie. I still enjoyed most of this movie. I just wish it offered a little more that was new. I think this did a good job by the Spider-Man franchise. I think it did it justice. And I know after some shitty, not very well received Spider-Man movies, I guess it was good to hit on one that I think pleased most of the fans. I think the strength of this movie was they added in a little John Hughes in this movie. I mean, this was kind of like, Breakfast Club meets a superhero movie, and I think that works. I think that and it's a smart move too, because Felipe, you said that your son, is he a freshman in college at this point?
No, he's going to be a junior.
He's going to be a junior, but I mean, it's going to draw in a young adult. It's going to draw in a young adult crowd to the comics. And if you think about some of the other comic book stuff, I think its audience is slightly skewed older. You know what I mean? People who people who grew up with comic books in their teens are now older, and they're starting to see these movies, and they're starting to leave behind this kind of young adult demographic. And I think it's smart for them, to give us the story of young Spider-Man, young Peter Parker, without giving us that fucking origin story again. There was a slight reference to it, and it was fine. But I'll say it's like I said, I wish the movie had done a little bit more and been a little bit more inventive in terms of story. It may have been inventive in terms of the character and his, the way he's been set up in the comics. But for me, as a casual moviegoer, it really didn't do much. I had seen the teen friendship stuff before. Seen the superhero stuff before. I echo your stuff about the villain, and I thought that one of the best moments of the movie was a kind of a quietly disturbing, threatening moment in the movie that I thought was really, really well written and brought a lot of tension into the movie with Keaton and Holland doing a really good job. Loved some of the other cameos in this thing. Tyne Daly showed up in this movie, which was awesome. Tony Revolori, I'm watching him. I'm like, I know I've seen that guy before. Oh yeah, Grand Budapest Hotel guy. Yeah. And it was fun. So a soft recommend for me, not a hard recommend. Comic book fans, obviously, it's a hard recommend. But casual moviegoers, I mean, you're not going to see anything super new in this movie that you haven't seen already before. So yeah, soft recommend.
All right. So 3 big recommends and a soft recommend. I think it's safe to say this one, at least from our opinion, definitely worth checking out. Guys, at this point, are we cool to move on to spoilers? Is there anything else you feel you need to say to anyone who may be listening that hasn't seen the film yet?
I feel like we've said quite a bit in terms of it, and I think anything else we say can be done so with the spoiler.
The toilers.
A toiler. I can't talk tonight, but yeah, I think what we can do from here is spoiler stuff. So yeah, let's go.
The toiler spurt.
The toiler spurt.
All right. Well, then with that said, guys, glad we are in agreement. We're going to go ahead and move on in to spoilers. They are officially fair game. This is the part of the show where I awkwardly ramble to give you time to either turn down your volume and step away for 20 minutes or so if you're listening live, or use the handy dandy time index Jim lovingly crafts for you guys in the show notes to skip ahead as needed. I'm done stalling. Guys, I want to start this discussion up because Felipe, you brought the point up right out of the gate, and I want to hear what you think, and then we'll unpack it from there. Was this Iron Man 4? Did we get too much Iron Man? What's your thought?
I can hit you straight up with that because I've been thinking about it. That's kind of one of the main things I kind of wanted to focus on in my spoiler section. Honestly, I was concerned. If you watch the trailer, he's in every bit of it. That's why I thought mentioning it at the beginning of the show wouldn't be too difficult of a thing. I'm not spoiling anything. If you've seen the trailer especially, you know that he's in it in several points. I thought it was just enough. Had they gone a scene or two more, I honestly would have said, hey, that's too much. But it was a big fear of mine heading into this movie that they were going to play to the Marvel MCU thing because, you know, Sony wanted to really tie that in and get everybody there. And you know, and we already knew it was going to tie directly into what we had seen in Civil War. So, you know, would it be too much Tony Stark? I thought it was perfect. I thought Tony Stark actually went from Tony Stark Iron Man to Tony Stark Big Brother. Tony Stark dad. I think there are a lot of dad issues in this film, which really now I can really talk about. There's some daddy issues in this thing. We don't, you know, you got Tony Stark over here, you know, the father, you know, Condor, his daughter, you know, we all know about what's going on there. I think this was a really good film for some of those subtextual reasons, for sure. But I think just enough Tony Stark, not too much.
So, Jim, how about you on this one? Where do you come down? Do you kind of feel similarly to Felipe, or?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it got to be a little too much. I didn't like that end scene at all. Like not the very end scene, but the scene at the Avengers team headquarters, whatever it is. Yeah, hadn't we seen that scene before? Didn't they unveil that thing before in another movie? Or am I imagining it?
No, they totally did. No. It was in an earlier film, right? So we've seen it before, but
then they said it got a facelift. But then he said it got a facelift. I don't know. Was that a new building or the same building with a new thing? I have no idea. And I'm not even sure why it mattered, to be honest. I think it was just, to me, that kind of stuff rubs me the wrong way because it's kind of like, it's really kind of advertisement for like the next movie. It doesn't have much to do with his movie. I mean, he goes there, he meets Tony Stark, he brings him all the way there, shows him the shiny suit, which I thought sucked. I thought his suit that he had, the suit that he had through the movie, I thought was awesome. I thought the suit that Tony Stark made for him was pretty terrible. And it looked like Iron Man Spider. I mean, that's what it looked like.
Yeah, Will, go get him, Will.
How about that?
That suit, that's just taste. I like the classic suit that he wore throughout the movie. I thought that was really cool. So I didn't like the shiny one that he had. But then
it's so shiny.
All that, and you guys probably saw my tweet about what I thought was a pretty shitty joke at the end of the movie, and then you know, about bestiality. It was kind of weird. And then you know, at the end he's like, no, I don't think I want it. See you later. That's the end of the movie, and it just kind of felt all for nothing.
I would disagree on that a little bit because I feel like this story was all about, this is a character who sort of before this story was probably like a street level up and coming, like friendly neighborhood Spider-Man who is all of a sudden like, it's like picking a kid out of like junior year of high school and like putting him like, you know, in like the NBA prospects. Like this is a kid who's like gone from like the D League to the A League just like that. And he's got a lot of temptation. He's got a lot of struggle in terms of like personal identity. Who am I? Am I a go out and fight the big league superhero villains guy? Because that's who I want to be. And I think that him turning that down at the end was a great story arc for him, because he's one of the few characters so far that has said, hey, look, I get it, Avengers, you guys are the big thing, but I need to help in my neighborhood. And that's something that we're not hearing from any of the other Marvel heroes. Like, all of them are fighting off alien invasions and cities that are being floated in the air and robot stuff. And this is a guy who just through the storyline realized, like, there's things I need to take care of back home. The suit itself was actually kind of a neat reference. And I think this is part of where, like, you know, comic fandom versus non-comic fandom will give you different experiences, and that's fine. One of the most notable, like, Tony Stark, Peter Parker comic book exchanges was the creation of the Iron Spider suit. And in this case, we got to see some of that play out, but also not play out, which was a fun subversion. For me, the Tony Stark character himself, the thing that saved this from being like too much Tony Stark was the filmmaker's decision to have Happy Hogan play as the intermediate for a lot of the scenes. I think that if you had just had Tony Stark doing all of those liaison moments, that would have been too much. But you actually got to divide those over two characters, and I think that was for the better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Going into this movie, and part of it is like a problem with the movie poster. We were talking about movie posters earlier. Felipe, you mentioned it, you know, in the trailer as well. It's like we see so much of like Tony Stark is Tony Stark and Iron Man. Like, do we really need both? And so going into the film, I'm kind of coming at it from the same viewpoint of like, I'm here for a Spider-Man movie. Like, yeah, Iron Man is cool, and some of that mentorship will be cool. But I really didn't want Spider-Man to be overshadowed. And I think they walked right up to that line, looked over the edge of the cliff, and they stopped. Some people are still saying it's a little bit too much for them. I definitely get that. I mean, Jon Favreau is pretty easy on my eyes, so I was glad to see him. You know what I mean? But I do have to say, the Iron Spider is one of my favorite, like, Iron Man, Spider-Man stories. I'm also a really big fan of the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon that had 4 seasons that wrapped up in January. And they did an Iron Spider bit in there as well. And in fact, I think this movie really pulls a lot of the plot threads from that cartoon, which I'm sure come from comics I haven't read, in the whole, like, setting Peter Parker in high school instead of, like, college or already working at the Bugle, in pulling in, like, some of his younger friends. I think the cartoon did so well with that. I was glad to see those elements sort of translate here into the film as well. I will say some of the Tony Stark, like, gadgetry and showing up at the last second to save the day, a little bit forced. I mentioned earlier the gimmicks of, like, the suit. There were some fun scenes where he's trying to figure out, like, what the suit does and what Tony has built in for him. But I was kind of like, can we please, like, just get back to Peter being able to do cool things with, like, his own inherent powers, which, by the way, does he not have a Spidey sense, or did I miss that in the movie?
Nope. Well, yeah, he may have it. He may have it, but you didn't see it in this movie.
No, it was not in the movie. I believe he does have it. It just wasn't a main focus of this, especially since he had the suit, which kind of replaced some of that.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere something from the director or the writer or whatever that said they wanted to get they wanted to break the mold of the last few Spider-Man movies, and this was one of the ways they did it, by jettisoning some of the stuff and focusing on other stuff. And Spidey sense was just one of the things that they did not want to highlight in this movie, which probably means you'll see it in the next. I'm sure you'll see it in the next movie. Yeah. That, you know, that it's something that was probably there, wasn't really hinted at in this movie, but yeah, they just chose to omit it.
That's crazy, because that'd be like Superman not having heat vision. I mean, that's an iconic piece of his.
More so, that'd be more like Superman not being able to fly. Like that is a very part and parcel like core element of Peter. So I'm with you. I do wish they had done a little bit more there with the power. What I am glad they did something with, and again, this is something that the other Marvel movies have not focused on as much. We got to see a couple other things from the comics show up, like Damage Control, which is the group of these are the guys whose job it is to clean up after the superhero and supervillain fight. So it was nice to see them show up and just like, hey, these guys make a big mess. Now, what are we down on the street doing with this? And to have that be, honestly, we're in spoilers, the villain's motivation. This is a guy who realized that there was a big hole that was being left because everyone was operating way up here, but there's all of this technology and all this crap that's just laying around that someone's going to want to buy, and no one's paying attention because I'm not blowing up cities with it. I'm just selling it to muggers and bank robbers. I love that because to me, what this movie did was it fleshed out the Marvel Universe in a very almost real way. Like it let us see kind of what everyone else is doing without it being like a huge stakes movie. I think that's great. It's why I'm okay with this film not taking a lot of good chances. This is a film that didn't need to. This is a film that just needed to give us a foundational story about Spider-Man being Spider-Man, doing Spider-Man things at the street level, and just letting that stuff play out. I love that we got to see a side of the Marvel Universe that we're only really seeing in maybe like the Defenders television stuff on Netflix, and that's not too connected to this Marvel Universe. So that's where the magic of this film lies, for me at least.
Yeah, I agree. And that's definitely a good point about sort of the on the ground, right? Like Tony Stark even tells, Peter Parker, like, you got to get your practice being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man before you can like go up to the big leagues. And one of the things I really like about the Luke Cage TV series is sort of like how Luke is operating in Harlem. Harlem itself really becomes a character in that show. And very similarly here, I think Queens becomes a character in this movie. I liked seeing the guy who runs the deli sandwich shop with his cat. Jim, you said there's a name for those cats. What was it again?
Bodega Cats.
Bodega Cats. They even have their own Twitter, Jim showed me. But also like seeing Spider-Man doing things like taking a picture of tourists for them and helping an old woman like with directions, and like we haven't really had a lot of sort of that street level superheroing. Like we don't see Thor like walking around taking selfies with people and like getting cats out of trees, right? So I thought that was a nice touch, and it was great to have a Spider-Man movie for once that is ditched of that like Uncle Ben angst that I think weighs Spider-Man down so much. I think it was wise to kind of cut some of that stuff out, just focus on like up and coming Spider-Man, what he's doing. The whole like test at the end not really being a test after all. Did that surprise you guys?
No.
It
didn't surprise me. That particular scene, unfortunately, again, for the comic book fan, that particular scene was actually taken from the Spider-Man Civil War comic itself. In that comic, Tony Stark convinces Spider-Man to come to his side, opposite Captain America, and he's going to out him. He's going to out Peter Parker on national TV, just like he did himself. And that was a little play right there. I wasn't surprised that he was going to turn it around, and I wanted to bring this up too, and I'm glad you asked about that. The reason I wasn't surprised is this was really focused on him being a kid. That moment when he's under the rubble and he's just scared. That Dakota had a little tear in his eye. He's just scared. He's screaming for help. He doesn't know what to do, and he's got to do it himself. And he sees that image of himself, also taken from a comic book, that half, old Spider uniform in his face, sitting there rippling in the water. Yeah, it's that to me. That's why I wasn't surprised that one was this a test, possibly not. When I saw the iron suit, I didn't think it was, but I knew that he would turn it down because being a kid was everything. Also, that moment when he's sitting on the roof when he's deciding whether or not to show up as Spider-Man and show off, and he looks back and he's realizing he's leaving his friends behind. That's what makes me forget about the Tony Stark stuff, and that's why I thought they had just enough in there. What'd you think, Will?
I 100% agree on that. Like it was nice seeing this character who got to all he wanted through this story was a chance at the big leagues, and when he got it there, he turned it down as the test. And what was actually kind of nice about it was like, oh, it wasn't a test. He actually could have said, I'm an Avenger right now, and instead he made the heroic decision for, you know, and that was the arc of the story. I'm just thinking back to something, Brad, you mentioned before that we didn't really double back on, but you mentioned the diversity of this cast. And I found myself
diverse.
So impressed. Like, if you think about like just Peter's group of friends at the school, at least the named ones, there's a couple background ones, but all of the main ones are non-white except for Peter. That's cool. They, you know, you mentioned Tony Revolori. He plays Flash, who's like usually like a big blonde kind of douchey bro guy. And instead, you know, this is more of a magnet school in this one. They're all like, you know, science technology whizzes. So he still gets to be the antagonist bully, but it's in a STEM field. That's really interesting to me. And Ned as the best friend. One of the things that was so neat for me about Ned as the best friend, this is one of the, I think you can argue that this is one of the 5 most prominent characters in the story, right? Like, you know, outside of obviously like Vulture and Tony Stark, you know, Ned is one of the major characters of the story. And he's a hefty dude. Like, this actor is not a thin guy. And at no point do they make a like fat joke. Like, at no point do they play that off as like, you know, like the other kids don't tease him for being chunky. He, you know, Peter doesn't go like, but you'll never be able to keep up, Ned. There's none of that. There is no fat shaming in this movie. Like, this is a character who, like, all he wants to do is to be the guy in the chair, you know, the support dude. And he gets his little arc for that. Maybe the film used Ned a little bit too much for my tastes. Like, I think that he was, you know, maybe he overstayed his welcome in a few scenes. But in terms of, like, just the diversity of the cast and the way that they treated weight and race and even gender, I'm all aboard. Like, I think this film did a lot of wonderful things.
Jim, you mentioned that it was overtly diverse. Did you mean overtly like in a bad way? Or?
No, just overtly like noticeable right off the bat. Like you knew right off the bat that this was some kind of you know, school that it was. I think it was a school for the gifted or something like that.
Yeah.
Because at one point they mentioned something about the school, but yeah, you could just see that character after character was, you know, typically for a white dude like Peter Parker, a lot of his friends would be white. Even his love interest in this movie, right, was non-white, which you know,
apparently she's MJ.
Well, not this one.
No. The other one,
Liz.
Oh, gotcha. Right.
but also MJ. Yeah,
and also MJ. Who, yeah, MJ might even be, you know, I don't know. She goes to the beat of her own drum too, right? So you never know what that character is going to bring later on. So yeah, I enjoyed the diversity of the cast, you know, across the board, and I think you're seeing a strong push on a lot of movie fronts to do this exact same thing, and I applaud it. I think it works. It's weird. It's weird to say this, but like you could see the tide turning. I'm waiting for the day when people don't notice that a cast is diverse or not. You know what I mean? Well, we don't have to talk about how diverse a cast is versus the rest of the movies. That day isn't here yet, guys.
That day is unfortunately going to happen for several, like for years. Like there's a lot of ground to be made up.
But that's where we're going, and I think this is a good step, you know, in that direction. So cool. Sure. I wanted to mention that one scene we talked before we get off. The scene between the Vulture.
Oh man.
And you know, when they're that whole tense scene from the moment he kind of walks in the house, and
yeah,
so
good.
I didn't know any of that. Did you guys know this? Did you guys know this going in? Did you know that he was going to be the dad of Liz?
Nope. Took me by surprise. That is a departure from the comics.
Yep.
And
that blew everybody away.
Yeah, feather in the movie's cap for keeping that one, for not foreshadowing that in the least. Now, if I go back and watch it, maybe there might be some foreshadowing. I don't know. Really subtle, but it didn't catch me. And it kind of like took my breath away, like, oh shit, stuff is going to go down now. And I enjoyed that whole scene from the moment they walked in the house until they got like, to the dance basically. And then the action kind of heated up. But
real quick, I want to say something.
Mano a mano, tension was great until the action started. And then it just kind of became, the same.
That was the movie's main scene. And I think that was amazing. And I'll throw this over to Brad because I think you brought this up earlier and I want you to talk about it. But I just want to talk about, I actually got dinged twice in that scene because, and I was telling, when I got out, my first impression when he opened the door was that, oh shit, he's there. Mm-hmm. Not that he's the dad. So that when he says that he's, you're here to pick up Liz, my daughter, that's when I was like, oh shit. So I got it. I got it twice. I totally got Shyamalan. I was not paying. I just didn't see it. I'm usually really good about catching these things. And so it made it even more enjoyable for me. And the scene in the car is everything in that movie. It is what makes this villain the villain that he is. Somebody posted a great meme real quick here earlier today. It says that Michael Keaton had lived long enough to see himself, the hero, become the villain. And it was a picture of Batman next to himself as Condor. And I thought that was a great meme.
Michael Keaton can only play flying characters.
Flying characters.
Yeah, can only Batman, Birdman, Vulture, yeah.
Maybe he'll play Squirrel Man next.
Squirrel Man.
Maybe.
Brad, did that scene take you by surprise too? It took me by surprise, and I think it's part of the racial thing that we talked about before. Like, you hear him talking about his family, like, oh, my daughter, and then you assume, as you shouldn't, like, oh, it's probably a white daughter, and you hear her talking about my father's away on business, and you think like, oh, she's a person of color, probably is so. And so I think that was a good switcheroo. It got me. It sounds like it got Felipe. Brad, it got you too?
Yeah, it definitely got me as well. Because, I mean, of course, the Liz character is in the comics. So, like, I'm used to, like, Liz's story and where Liz comes from. And so I wasn't expecting it. Like, it just totally came out of left field for me. And I appreciated what they did there. And, when he walks out and he's like, my daughter, whatever, your first thought is like, oh, like, is Liz like adopted? Like, and then her mom comes out, and not only is she an African-American woman, but she's also like a big girl, and she's like an attractive big girl. And so we were kind of talking a little bit about some of the body positivity with Ned, the friend. Here again, another great example of that, which I thought was fantastic to see as well.
Good stuff.
Yep. Hey, real quick, did you guys notice the gun at first, by the way? When he was in the car, that he had pulled up a gun when he reached back and just held it against the headrest of the passenger seat.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't catch it at first. Dakota didn't see it at all. And I thought that was an interesting thing too. But if you notice, they downplayed that because it was more about their interaction.
Right.
It was very subtle. So
it just ratcheted up the tension just enough to make you really pay attention.
One of the great scenes. That was a great scene.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. As was Spider-Man not being able to swing from anything and having to run on foot in Spider Pursuit.
Yeah. The only real disappointment for this, and I posted this on social media, after seeing Tom Holland on the lip sync battle, doing the in drag as Rihanna doing the Umbrella song. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it is one of the best things I've ever seen.
You guys gotta watch it.
I have not seen a guy. I'm surprised at how good a dancer and how good a drag performer he is. Like, after seeing that, I was disappointed that we didn't get to see him do some more dancing. He is not Spider-Man 3 emo goth dancing.
Drag
That would
queen.
have been the wrong-
Emo goth drag queen.
Yeah, give me in the next one. Just let him just like, you know what? If Peter Parker decides, you know what, I'm going to be a little genderqueer this year, and show up wearing a wig and a bodice, you know what? I'm okay with that, only because Tom Holland can pull that shit off.
But look, it can only happen if the wig and bodice are made out of spider webbing fluid.
Oh, see, now that's not only is this something I want to see in the movie, but I'm gonna go write that erotic fan fiction tonight.
He's all like, I need to put on something sexy.
There were a couple of weird moments in the movie, and I'm not going to make a big deal out of them, but they kind of took me by surprise. There was a fuck, marry, kill joke in the movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but
she said F, but still, I'm like, that's kind of out of place in this movie, given that not that teenagers don't really say that shit, because we know they do, but in a movie like this, for them to portray that when they hadn't really portrayed any kind of raciness between the kids before, up to that point, or since that point, that was just kind of took me back a little bit. And then Stark's joke at the end with the screw the pooch, but you did the right thing. You took it to the clinic. You took it to the free clinic and you adopted out her puppies or something like that.
Her hybrid human babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. That was, kind of a rapey bestiality joke, which just kind of like, what? Really? Did he say that? So anyway, but that's Stark for you. He can be an asshole.
Indeed. Hey, MJ came up earlier. I just want to return to that real quick before we wrap. Do you guys want to hear a funny MJ story?
Yeah.
Go. All right.
All right. Jim, you're saying all right, but the story is about you. I hope you don't mind.
Oh,
so we're watching the movie, and at the end,
I'm going to mute this shit.
She's like, you can call me MJ. I turned to Jim and I'm like, oh my God, it's MJ. And Jim's like, is that like a marijuana thing? Or and I'm like, no, it's Mary Jane. He's like, yeah, like marijuana. I'm like, no, Mary Jane Watson.
Marijuana Watson. Yeah. Like,
you can't tell me those writers weren't high. Come on. They wrote that character.
I mean, she did kind of come to prominence in the what was it, like early 70s. So
if any one of those kids was experimenting with the little marijuana, which one of them would you have picked?
Probably.
I'm just saying.
Oh goodness.
Ned comes to hey, real quick, Brad. Can I give one quick shout out to one particular actor that I love seeing in this movie? Ignacio Varga, who plays Nacho on Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, who may or may not be, still kind of to be determined, but probably could play in the next Spider-Man movie as the Scorpion.
Ooh.
Yep. Like that was we had a bad thing, like when I was sitting there next to Scott when we were watching this. I was like, did you see his neck tattoo? He's like, what was it? And I was like, it was a fucking scorpion. And he said his name was Max Gargan. So he's going to be the Scorpion. He's like, oh, I just saw he had a tattoo. I'm like, yeah. But yeah, I'm right there with you. Like I was doing the same thing. I saw that neck tattoo and I was like, I immediately perked up like, oh, oh, okay.
So the teacher too, what's her name? The actress from Orange is the New Black.
Yes, great to see her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Salinas Levia.
Yes, yeah, it was great to see her. I love her on that show. Yep.
So that was I think Scott did to me. He was like, he tapped me and was like, "We're just a new black."
Oh boy.
Oh,
all right,
Brad. PSAs. You want to talk about the PSAs before we wrap?
Oh yes, the Captain America PSAs. My favorite is the one where they're in the gym and Captain America points to the wrong side of the screen.
Like,
where
and here's Coach to tell you about it. And he points to this side. The coach is on that side.
Right, that was awesome.
Just wanted to say those are great, and apparently there's going to be a whole bunch more on the DVD that we haven't seen yet.
Oh really? I want to see that. I want to see the Captain America one, like Captain America Sex Ed. PSA.
So you're growing hair down there.
I think so.
All the end credit scene PSA. or well, I don't know if it's a PSA, but the end credit scene by Cap only solidified my feeling that I should not wait around for end credit scenes. Right? Did he not basically say you're a fucking jerk if you sit around for these things?
Yeah, no, he went like this. Yeah, that's exactly what he did, and it was great.
And yeah, exactly. And you guys have been telling me all along I've been crazy. But now the Cap says it. Now the Cap says it. You're all, oh yeah, Cap.
The best type of post-credit scene, post-credit, is the type that doesn't have a huge like part to the story. Like there's been some where it's just like where the post-credit or the mid-credit like is an important part of the story and causes has extra resolution or something like that. That should be in the film itself. But if it's something light and it's throwaway like this, or the one at the end of Deadpool was basically this as well. I think those are fun. Like, that you can stick around and watch them, or you can't. You can have fun with them. You don't have to. They're disposable, and that's perfectly fine for a post-credit scene for me.
Yeah, but I mean, great. Like if you have to leave to warm up your car or something, it's probably best to spend your time doing that.
Or if you really need to get home and wash your hair or something, that would be fine too.
Right.
Don't have that problem.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, guys, let's go ahead and then move on to wrap up here with some quick plugs. This is the part of the show where we leave our movie discussion behind and talk about other cool things that we think you should check out. Felipe, what have you got this week?
Hey, just really quick reminder that on July 18th, Rogue One will be on Netflix, and I plan on watching that a lot.
Good
nice. One. Absolutely. Get in the spirit for the next Star Wars movie coming up just in December. Yeah. It's coming fast. Probably why Ready Player One is not coming out in December, guys. Just to go back to the beginning of the show.
Pretty fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say that's probably it. For me this week, also a movie that's coming out this weekend, War for the Planet of the Apes. Jim and I have been a fan of this franchise. Will, I think you're kind of...
I'm a huge fan of exactly these ones. I hated the Tim Burton one, but these last two have been
way on board.
Way better than they should than they had any right to be.
Definitely. So going into this third one, super excited to see how all of this kind of comes together and wraps. Check it out this weekend. We're going to be reviewing it on the show next week. So consider it your Movie Bears podcast homework this weekend to go out and see it if you can. Jim, what do you got?
Whatever it is, it'll be monkey business. You can count on that. I caught up with a movie that came out earlier this year, I think very early this year, that I just didn't get into theaters to see, but watched it, downloaded it on the iPad from iTunes, The Zookeeper's Wife. And this is a Jessica Chastain movie with, it has the guy, Johan Heldenberg from, Brad, you would know him from the Broken Circle Breakdown. And also has Daniel Bruhl, who I love to watch act. This is basically, it's kind of a different take on a true story Holocaust movie. It all happens in Poland. She and her husband run a zoo in Warsaw at the time the Nazi invasion took over and through until the Russians came in and wiped them out. Great story. I think it's a true story. I thought the acting was top notch. Didn't really light the world on fire in terms of storytelling. It's pretty straightforward, but well done, beautifully photographed. I love animals, so there's lots of cool animals in here, and they tie into the story too. So yeah, it's called The Zookeeper's Wife. It's on iTunes for rent right now.
Bam. All right. Thanks, babe. Appreciate that. And Will, close us out for plugs. What have you got?
Gee, like it's hard because like the ones that I really want to talk about are more like, the Big Six and limited release, and we all liked it, and you should go watch that. But Really, most of my like last few weeks has been I've been playing a lot of the Friday the 13th game on PlayStation 4. And so because of that, I've been on a huge slasher kick. So I've rewatched Final Girls, which was a South by Southwest movie we watched. I rewatched the first two Friday the 13th movies, which first one actually, despite some pacing issues, kind of holds up. And then I also watched something the other night, and I'm going to plug it, even though it's a good bad movie. It's this thing that came out in 2006 called Hatchet, and it's just a revitalization of the slasher genre. These tourists are out in these like New Orleans swamp, and this deformed hillbilly guy, a la Jason, starts hatcheting through them. They got Kane Hodder, the guy that played Jason, to play the killer in this. They got a lot of like notable people to make cameos in this. Like for example, like Robert Englund shows up for a moment here. You also get some people like, if you're a Buffy fan, Mercedes McNabb, who plays Harmony in that show, shows up. So, I mean, it is just a schlocky slasher, but it's one that's made obviously with love, with nothing but practical effects, that likes its blood, likes its body count, and just wants to have a good time. So it's not a great movie, but if you like slashers, like, it is a perfectly serviceable one. So that's my plug, because I've just been watching a bunch of like bloody movies lately.
All right. Well, there you go. Hopefully you, our listeners, have found some other cool stuff to check out and get going for you. As we wrap up here, one final thing we want to do, Felipe, if folks want to get in touch with you, if they want to talk movies with you online, how can they do that?
You can find me on Twitter at fgarcia66. That's generally where I kind of just like throw up my quick reviews and things like that. I didn't do one for Spider-Man because I knew I'd be on here. And thank you so much for having me on, guys. It's been great to see you. Will, good to see you again. I did finally get to meet Will a few weeks back. So great to see you as well.
Yeah.
Here in Tucson.
Great having
it was super
great
fun.
having you, Felipe. Great having you on
guys.
again. Felt like old home
Absolutely.
again.
Yeah.
We'll be watching we're going to watch Dunkirk with you.
Yes, we're going to go see
That's
Dunkirk.
right.
I can't wait.
Oh, so jealous.
70 millimeter, Will.
Yep.
In the Loft's main theater, where they have brand new seats that are actually, padded.
Comfortable.
That's 70. I'm excited for the 70 miller, but it was the 70 millimeter. I'm jealous that I won't get to see it with you guys.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be with us in spirit. Well, Jim,
Right.
where
And
can folks find you, Jim?
Find me on Twitter at JJP Out West. All one word, JJP Out West, where you can look for my very infrequent tweets about movies. And, I'll follow you if you want me to. So at JJP Out West.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Will, how about you?
All right, you can find me on Twitter at Whatever Cove. You can find me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis there, as I am in real life. Funny how that works. Also on Letterboxd, a site for reviewing and cataloging movies. Look for me by William Lindis there. For some reason, that name just follows me around. And lastly, this is not a place you can find me, but I just wanted to take a quick moment to say happy birthday to my boyfriend, Scott.
Yes.
Today is his birthday.
Happy birthday.
He very graciously let me slip away a little bit
Happy birthday,
to
Scott.
come record, but I just wanted to make sure that shout out was there.
All right.
Scott, happy birthday, and please don't hate us for taking your wonderful partner away on your birthday night.
Yeah,
You can resume the celebration now.
if we had known, we would have planned around it. We are so sorry, Scott.
Yeah,
Happy birthday.
He was going out and doing some bingo stuff with one of his friends, so it was like it worked out as well. But
Well, all right. Well, guys, you can find me on Twitter at iBradPro. If you're watching on YouTube, it's right down here in my little special name tag thingy. Feel free to add me on Twitter, chat me up. Would love to talk movies with you guys. I also want to give a quick shout out to some friends we saw over the weekend at Bigger Vegas. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a big group picture together. There are 1,000 people there. Getting more than like 2 people you want to see in one place at one time in Vegas is nearly impossible. But we got to go see Spider-Man Homecoming, actually, with our crazy Canadian friends, Walt and Darren, who were at the event as well. And of course, Larry was with them too. He didn't make it out to the movie with us, but it was awesome being able to see this movie with other like-minded, bear folk who also happen to listen to the show. So hope you guys especially enjoyed the review. If you're out there in listener land, like I know you probably are. We love you guys. We miss you already. Guys, I think that wraps us up for the week. Yes. Are we good?
Yeah,
Good.
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us live or via digital tape delay on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or on our website. We will see you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.